Hey guys, welcome to another episode with the 67 GTO. I want to say thank you to all my current subscribers and welcome to all my new subscribers. Any comments, any questions, keep them coming. I'll show you what's going on here. Just kind of following along the same old lines. Take one step forward, take two steps back. I've got the repairs done up front here on the windshield filler panel that goes between, it's literally from the factory, it's part of the dash, and it fills the area between the windshield and the cowl panel. Well, I had to replace that because it was really rusted. So that was the one step forward. When we left off last, I showed you the floor was out and it's ready for that. But I want to get all this other work done. I want to get the dash in here. I want to get everything finished that I can get to from underneath. That way I can stand up underneath here and I can get to all the dash areas. I can get under the dash, I can clean, I can treat everything. I'll show you when I turn the camera around here. I'll show you what I did in here to treat everything. So let me flip this around. I'll show you where we're at. Here's the car, here's the main body. As you can see, the whole firewall now has been completely cleaned and treated. I got rid of all of that glue and junk that was all up inside there, and I have everything coated. There's a little dust up there from me rubbing against it, and there's a little shiny spot too from the light coming in, but this is all treated. We won't have to worry about this anymore. And this is, I use Chassis Saver. You can use Pore 15, but just make sure you do yourselves a favor and you clean it really well, and you put a good tooth on it. Scratch it with 150 grit, no finer than 150 grit. And then put your Chassis Saver or your Pore 15 or whatever coating you want on there. That way you won't have to worry about it coming off. As we come around, you can see on the A-pillar here, I've already started cleaning this off and it's cleaning up pretty well. We're getting down to the steel. There's the new filler panel all the way across. The one that was on here was completely rotted. And the two steps back is the dashboard, which, like I said, this was originally part of the stamped dash, and now we're going to have two separate pieces. One of the areas I found, which I believe is an assembly flaw, might be a stamping flaw. I'm not sure if this is true with all the A bodies, but you can see this is factory seam sealer here. And it went in and it literally stopped right here. There's that panel that comes down here. It fills this whole area in. There's two screws that hold it in place. Well, you don't see any of this. There was no seam sealer under here. You can even see where I cleaned out, there's some pitting here. I cleaned all this out. Well, not only did it not have seam sealer, but right here was a huge hole, and it wasn't rust. It was a product of the stamping. It was the way this piece was stamped. There's three panels here. You've got this panel, which is the whole A-pillar side. You've got the inner A-pillar, and then you've got your cowl. So you've got three panels coming together right here, and there was no seam sealer in here, and there was a big gaping hole in here, which leads me to believe that that's where a lot of water was running up here when you're driving, and it was crawling in here and running down. If you remember in the earlier videos, both sides of this car had a problem where in this area here you saw water, rust stains where they ran down, and it rotted the toe boards, it rotted all the bracing out in here that I had to fix. So I'm wondering, and somebody can let me know, somebody that's done more of these A bodies than me, the 64 to 67 A bodies. We'll go to the other side here, but let me know, if you guys that have done this have seen this before. This is something that maybe guys want to address when they get their car painted. Remove these panels and make sure you get seam sealer in here. This side didn't have anywhere near as big of a hole right here, but it still had a little hole. And again, there was no seam sealer from this point back. And that's just inviting moisture. Back to one step forward, two steps back. So here's this panel. I had to cut the dash out, as I mentioned in the previous video, to make it easier to work, plus I had to fix the dash. Well, I've got the dash out over here, and I'll show you what I found. And what we have is just more shoddy repair work from the past. First off, here's the back of the dash, and you can see these were bare steel from the factory. So you're seeing a lot of surface rust in here. And then down here, you can see where water accumulated. I was scratching at this. There's some pretty heavy scaling in there that I'm going to try to clean out the best I can. But again, this was all pretty much almost all raw steel. So this is what happens. This is what you never see because you don't pull the metal dash out of your car. But the 2 steps back is right around here. If you look at this whole leading edge, this is right at the base of the windshield. I'll slow down and try to get this camera to focus here. It is all covered in pits. Some of them are almost through the steel. You get over here and they are through the steel. What that means is I am going to actually have to rebuild the whole front of this dashboard. And to my knowledge, I do not believe they make a replacement piece for here, which means I have to make all this by hand. And we all know what that means. This just is going to translate into, unfortunately, more expense for the customer. But this was all fixed prior to the current customer purchasing this car. If you can kind of see inside those pits, you see that pinkish stuff in there? That's glazing putty. So most likely the gentleman that sold this car to the family that owns it now, 30 years ago, I believe, this is how he fixed it. He just put glazing putty right over top of the rust, painted it, put the windshield back in, and called it a day. You can't fix rust that way. Glazing putty is not a repair. Glazing putty shouldn't be used at all. The only time I have ever used glazing putty is if I have a stone chip that is so small it's almost not visible. One of the big issues with glazing putty is there's a lot of shrinkage. It's a lacquer-based product, so it's just not something you want to use to repair your car. To fix this, there's really only one right way to fix it, and I'm going to have to cut out all that rust. I'm going to have to make that piece, and unfortunately it's got a shape to it. You can see it's on the curve, so I'm also going to have to make the piece curved in 2 different directions. So we've got a compound curve that I got to create all the way along here. Oh, I don't know, this is what, 4 feet? Probably over 4 feet long. This is going to be a real nice car when it's done, and the way I'm treating everything, we know it's never going to see the weather that it saw before. They're not going to drive this in the middle of winter, and they're not going to leave it parked outside in the rain all the time, I don't believe. But what I'm doing is trying to prevent any future rust. If there are areas that these cars are prone to leaking, which, you know, I showed you before up in the corners up here, if they're going to leak in here and we're still going to get some minor dripping, I don't want any of my new work getting rusted. You know, up under here as well, the way this is designed up underneath here, the water comes up and it hits here. And it's supposed to come up and there's a little lip and you can't see it, and I can't get the camera in here. But there's a chance that moisture could get behind there. And that's actually what happened with this car, in which it rotted from the inside here, and then the dash rotted from the outside at the base of the windshield. So I'm going to get cracking here. I'm going to finish cleaning off that dash, come up with a plan of attack on how I want to make the repair piece. If I'm going to do it in several sections, which I'm probably going to have to do because my equipment here isn't wide enough to make this out of one piece. So it's going to have to be several pieces that I'm going to be shaping with the shrinker stretcher and the brake and maybe even a little bit on the English wheel, I'm not sure. So that's where we're at. More bad news, but we're going to fix it. We'll end up with a nice car. Hey guys, I just wanted to add to the video here. You can see I installed the dashboard back into the car, and I did this to show you that the reproduction front windshield header, which is be great if they made it as a full stamping on the dash, but I get it. You know, this is a pretty intricate piece. I don't think anybody's going to make a mold, or excuse me, a die to stamp out a whole new dash for a GTO. So, but what I'm saying is I got it in the car, and I wanted to show you that even with the best planning, sometimes it doesn't work out. What I had done was, when this was still in the car, I marked the dash, which where I thought was high enough up to cover the rust that I saw. And it looked like this piece was going to cover over that, so we thought all was well and good and we'd be able to weld these two together and that would be it. Well, once I got the dash out and got this piece in, and then the other day sanded this down, I uncovered a lot more of the rust. And you can see as it's sitting in here, this is not exactly sitting in the right position. It'd be about there. But you can see that the pitting damage I found goes way higher than what the replacement patch piece covers. And that's why I have to make a new piece. It's unfortunate that the panel wasn't a little bit longer, and I don't know, I think the aftermarket could make this panel long enough to where they have the technology to build the tool. They've got all this shape in it. All they had to do was come up here and put the radius in it and maybe bring it back to here all the way up towards the defroster vents. It would just make the repair a lot easier, because I just don't think that this car is unique with how high up the rust went. It's unfortunate that I uncovered more once I cleaned off the paint. You can see over here how far back this went. This went all the way back, and some of them are pretty far up that radius. So I'm going to have to make a panel. I just wanted to add to the last video just to show you. Here it is sitting in the car, and the replacement piece, the patch piece, just isn't big enough to fill the void. So I'm going to get cracking on this thing, and we'll see how it comes out. As always, like, subscribe. Any questions or comments, feel free. Stay tuned. We'll see where we end up next.